Welcome back to the Captimizer podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Flanley, retired chief of police and all-around wannabe Renaissance man. That kind of sounds corny when I say that out loud, but it's the truth. Jack of all trades, master of none. Well, maybe I mastered a few. But anyway, I'm excited about today's guest. We have John Beck, who is a former business owner and also a coach. And I'm not even going to get into telling you who John is because I'm going to let John do that for himself. Thanks for being here, sir. Really appreciate you taking some of your time to spend with us today.
All right. Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with everyone. Give you a little bit of background. As Patrick mentioned, I currently, for the last 4 years, have a coaching business where I work with a variety of individuals in all different genres of organizations. But to step back a little bit and to give you some history, I spent 18 years in corporate America, really in the working my way up through a process in a Fortune 500 company. Starting out just as an individual contributor and moved up to running a large division of that organization that supported customers around the world. So after 18 years of that, I was looking to do something, the next challenge, and had the opportunity to start my own business, which is something I had always been interested in. So I started my own business with my business partner in a home office, just the two of us. We had that business for 15 years. We built it up from the two of us to a team of about 25, doing around $20 million a year in revenue. At that time, after 15 years, the opportunity presented itself to move on and to sell that business, which we did and executed that process. Through that varied career, there were a couple of things that I realized about myself, and that is that I had grown a little tired, or a little, maybe for lack of a better term, a little unpassionate about the specifics of the business. But what I really had a passion about was watching my team grow and watching my team grow in their capabilities, capacities, and seeing them move into different positions and really blossom as individuals and experience the joys of that growth. So that's when I realized at this time, it really gave me the opportunity to move into something I had watched all through corporate America and even my own area of, we'd hire coaches to come in, or we'd have presenters come in, talk about topics. And I always thought, that would be awesome. So I started showing up, and that's my company that I have now. And really my focus is working with individuals, typically in what I call it is leadership development and perspective, really taking a look at what is the perspective that you bring to the situation that you're involved in today, and really working with a lot of leaders in how to continue to enhance their personal approach to their leadership responsibilities.
Well, that's pretty cool. A lot to discuss there. But one of the themes that you just mentioned, I think, is something that we'll probably talk a lot about today. But it's the organizational development. It's the pathway that individuals, paths that they choose, and paths that are chosen for them for a variety of different reasons. And I would say in policing, this idea of coaching the individual is it's not new, but it's also very new, if that makes any sense. Because
Yep.
in policing, the term has generally been used as trainer. I'm a trainer. I run training, and the difference is, I think, pretty profound when you kind of take a step back and think about it. Trainers tend to have a very good technical or tactical understanding about what needs to be done in a specific execution of a task. Whereas a coach is somebody that isn't necessarily there to teach you how to complete a task or the best way to go about a task. They're there to really show you a path on how to get the most out of yourself. And if we can do that, then that's going to improve the way that you not only complete your task, but the way you complete your task within the framework of an organization. In my case, police departments. In your case, Fortune 500 company, and then as an individual business owner. So that's kind of one of the things that I want to really touch on today, and maybe pick your brain a little bit about why you think coaching in policing, even though that's not your background, why you think that is going to be beneficial.
Absolutely. And I really couldn't have said that any better. Nicely teed up there, because at the end of the day, it's a situation where if we look at it, and myself not having a career in law enforcement, how is it that I can possibly help an officer or anyone else in a department if that's not what I do? And that really gets to that difference between training in specific scenarios, such as weapons or whatever the case might be. You've got individuals all throughout departments that are focused on those. They're experts. They help the individuals see what might be areas of improvement for them around a specific topic. The difference with coaching that I believe is that we really hold a space for the individual to look at that and work with that individual about what their personal challenges are around what they do every day. And how do we hold that space for them to allow them to maybe see some things that they don't see on their own. That's done through discussion. It's done, there's a process and some training all around coaching. But at the end of the day, it's really holding a space to listen, understand, and be able to give that individual, maybe help them see their perspective, to see what their challenge is by simply articulating it often. Many times we have all these things going on in our head, and we're working on the specifics and the tactics and all the things around our role. We've got things at home with our family, and we've got them in our head, but we really don't take the time to sit down and say, I'd sure be feeling better about this particular role if I understood this, how I'm approaching it, or what it's doing, how it's affecting me. So these are all things that really don't necessarily pertain to the specifics of law enforcement, but really help the individual that is the officer to be the best they can be. And it's coming to their world.
So I don't know where, where the best place to start this conversation, but you mentioned firearms. And so that immediately just kind of sends me mentally down a path. I was a firearms instructor for almost 20 years. Not just, handguns, but patrol rifle, submachine gun. And again, these are, depending on your role within organizations, it might be because you get promoted to a leadership position, or because, let's just say, I'm a good shooter. I was a good shooter and still am a good shooter. I'd like to say I don't do it as much as I'd like to, but there's an example of, okay, here's somebody, I was second in my academy class in the firearms in shooting. I lost the Top Gun award. Um, I think it was by like less than a point. Over 300 over. It was a 300 score. You had to shoot the course 3 times, and then they took the average. And at the time, I was 27 in the academy, and the gentleman that beat me was 48 years old, retired Marine.
I
He was a good shot.
bet.
But, in any case, I use that as, in thinking about in moving forward. So several years down the road, I become a member of our SWAT team. And now, we need firearms instructors. And since I'm a good shot, it's just kind of a natural path that you go on. Okay, well, if he's a good shooter, he's a good teacher also. And, I think I learned a lot as a firearms instructor, but in terms of um, coaching versus teaching versus instructing versus training, they all seem like the same thing. But if you've ever tried to teach somebody how to shoot a firearm, just a handgun, for example, that maybe has some bad habits or has an idea in their head about what they're supposed to do, and their results are not as good as you would like them to be. When you're trying to make them better, generally what we do is we focus on the the process and the steps, and we're trying to diagnose where are the mechanical failures in the pull of the trigger, the grip of the firearm, which are they right eye, left eye dominant? What are the things that might be causing them to shoot high and right or low and left? And there are times where you can see it pretty clearly, and you can make some pretty simple adjustments. You can see people, their confidence is low. You make a simple adjustment, it gets a little bit better. Their confidence builds more. They double down on what, on their technique. And then next thing you know, you got a good shooter. But then on the other hand, you have somebody that it seems like no matter what you do, things don't get better. And this is kind of where you start to realize, okay, well, there is a bigger mental block someplace that's preventing them, because I can take the gun out of their hand and shoot it and show them, no, it's not the gun. I can put 5 in the X ring here. It's something that you're doing, and what it might actually be is a mental block where it's a fear of failure. I know if I can't get this score in the right qualification range, then I'm not going to be able to pass. And if I don't pass, then I'm going to lose my job. And if I can't do this, or, quite frankly, in our profession, if I have a low level of confidence in my ability to use a firearm, then how am I going to be able to protect myself or protect others when I go out? So that's kind of where I see this, this merging, and the power of where the coaching mindset can take over from the trainer mindset, and we can develop. That's a long way of saying that coaching can be extremely beneficial if you allow yourself to be open to it.
Absolutely. And I think that's oftentimes the biggest challenge. I would say that I've had a number of corporate individuals, I mean, very high level CEO, owners of large businesses that I've worked with, that they're the boss, they're the head guy, they built the business, whatever the case might be. She's done all of these capabilities. Why do I need coaching? But then they finally decide, well, let's go give this coaching thing a try. All of those engagements start out with a little bit of a discussion around the tactics. To your point, in your case, the firearms training. In my case, oftentimes it's some tactics around this is a challenge with this department. They're not performing. And that's what they believe coaching is. And while we start there, where we always end up is about the person, because it's the person and how they show up, how they come to the meeting, come to the department, come to their training for firearms. It's that person and how they show up that makes all the difference. And it's been very interesting over the last 4+ years to watch how almost all of the engagements start out on a specific tactic, specific issue, and then we evolve and develop into a whole myriad of things that are personal. And as they begin to understand and work on those, we see progress. And progress takes so many different forms. In the case of law enforcement and officers, it might be, it might be personal. It might be the family life. It might, that is affecting how they show up to to their shift every day. Or it may be that they've got a sense, as you pointed out, a sense of fear about the way that they're being looked at for the next promotion. Fully capable, got all the skills, all the personality, everything they can do to do that role, but fear is holding them back. They typically, for most of us, I know certainly was for me, I didn't recognize that. I didn't know that's what it was. So simply by discussing it, having some conversation, putting some action steps in place, we begin to understand maybe what some of the things are that are limiting us or limiting our beliefs around what we can do. And I think that's a big difference with coaching is it's not the specifics of how to hit that target dead center. It's what's going on in with that person that may be affecting some of that.
Well, and in law enforcement, we generally have a lot of type A personalities, and I'm sure we're not the only place that has that. But it's
Yep.
it's kind of ingrained in us right from the start, right? You have this concept that every officer is a leader because they are. When they're inside of the department and inside their organization, they may hold a position, and it's going to be different throughout your career, but depending on where you are in your career path, you're always going to have a place where you fall in the chain of command. However, once you step outside of the police department, if you're a patrolman and it's your first day in solo patrol after you have been through your training program, and you show up on the scene of an accident, for example, you are the leader. Everybody there is looking to you to make the decisions. And so we focus on this from a very early, almost from day one, right? About why it's important to take charge, why it's important to be confident in what you're doing. So we want to make sure that you've got a really good understanding of those core competencies, and then we're going to build on it. And I say all that with the understanding that sometimes now that can be an impediment for growth down the road, because what you said, I think, is very profound. And I think most people recognize this on some level, but they don't necessarily act on it, is that fear is always our greatest barrier. It's bad. I know I'm not the one that said this, but right, everything you want in life stands on the other side of fear. And the more you can attack that, the more success you're going to have, the more personal satisfaction you're going to have.
Absolutely.
And that's easier said than done. And the fear of failure, especially when it comes to making a decision when lives are on the line, or when you're in a critical incident. Well, what happens if I make the wrong decision?
Yep.
And I'll say this, that it's not even so. I think one of the biggest fears within policing today is when officers uh, do make a decision, they're more concerned about how they're going to be judged by their peers than they are by the results of what happened with their decision. And maybe that's true everywhere, but um, I see that a lot in policing, and I was guilty of that a lot when I was a younger officer.
Absolutely, and I think that is a very, very common feeling amongst all individuals, because the difference being is that, the I'm the person that's involved in the accident. The officer, leads the process. I've only got so much knowledge of what that leadership is. The rest of the team, the department, everyone else is looking at it from a much more educated standpoint, which then makes us have this concern or fear of, oh, did I do that right? Or did I do? It's not what was the outcome of the situation. It's, did I follow all the procedures the way I should have? How do I, God, what do they think of me? It's the same scenario in our personal lives, in the business world. You're giving a big presentation to a bunch of people, and say it's a customer, and you're talking to the customer, and you've got your manager, your leader in the room with you. You're much more concerned about what that person thinks than the customer, even though the reason you're all there is the customer. So sometimes we don't get the opportunity, and we don't have someone maybe help us see that, well, wait a minute, how am I really approaching this? And what are my concerns? And what can I do to begin to alleviate that fear? Now, fear never goes away, and it never should. I mean, there's always a certain amount of fear we need. But at the end of the day, there's a process of being able to minimize or to understand that there's some fear. And how do I cope with that fear so that I'm doing my absolute best? And that, I think, is where coaching can really help individuals a lot.
So great segue. So since I've been retired, I've had the opportunity to travel around the state and around the country to visit different police departments, talking about different technologies. One of the things that I've been doing is working with Axon Coaching and helping them bring the idea, the concept to police departments, running trials and bringing the program to different departments. And it's been fascinating, right? Because I think on one level, I think chiefs and administrators really see the benefit of it, not just from an organizational development perspective, but an individual development. But you also have there's also a thought that, well, you know what, we're a good police department. We do things well here. Yeah, thanks, but no thanks. We can get this done. And they probably can. Maybe they can. I have to go back and, again, use myself as a personal example, but I was, again, on this path where, I had good technical competencies. I love to read, I'm always curious. So there was always things like that. I think that led to opportunities for me. But I personally, even though I'd been to Northwestern's Frontline Supervisor School, Northwestern University, their School of Police Staff and Command. I went to State and Local Leaders Program at Harvard. I went through these programs and I learned a lot of really good information. I met a lot of great people. I learned a ton that helped me in my profession, but it wasn't close until the end that I actually went through a coaching program. And that was like, oh man, the light bulb went off. And I just realized that I wish I would have done this at the front end of my career and not at the back end. And I'm not saying I wouldn't have needed it again at the back end, right? Because every time your roles and responsibilities change, it affects the dynamic of about, how you interact and, the things that you're doing personally. But that's all, again, another long way of saying, you as a coach coming from corporate America who worked your way up, what would be your argument to a chief that or to an administrator that might be reluctant to bring in an outside coaching group to work with your police department and your officers? What would you say to a chief that didn't want to do that or was reluctant to do that?
Great question. And I think it stems primarily around the fact that it isn't a question of necessarily of can they do it, but it's about if our goal is to truly help the individuals that are going to be coached, then we need to create a space that they feel safe, they know that it's confidential, and they feel willing and able to open up about what is their challenge at that time. And challenges change and move and add, and some go away. But at that time, what is it that they believe might benefit them the most from coaching? Well, they've got to have a nice, safe space to be able and willing to open up. Doesn't always happen inside an organization. And that's not just in law enforcement, it's every organization. Because if you're opening up to someone else that is maybe a mentor on the force with you, you're providing them some kind of personal information, a lot of people are very reluctant to do that because they don't know where it's going to go. With coaching, and especially with action coaching, that is absolutely a fundamental. It is confidential.
And that's important because I want that's not just in policing, because I think sometimes people inside of law enforcement think that this is something that's unique to our profession.
Yeah. Trust me, especially in the large corporate world, when you have all kinds of politics, all kinds of, everybody's got a different agenda of where they're going, what they want, and how they're going to get there. Very few people open up, even if they have a very trusted mentor. They may open up a little, but there's always holding back. And sometimes that information, again, as I mentioned before, sometimes just articulating it, the individual just saying it out loud is, the light bulb goes off. There's an awareness of, oh, wow, that really is something that concerns me. They may never say that out loud to anyone, including their spouse, their family members, because we all have that concern of, oh, will I be viewed as less? Will I be viewed as weak? Will I be viewed, how will I be viewed? Well, the coach is encouraging that openness, because that's how we get to an understanding to be able to support the individual in knowing what is the challenge and what steps might they take. And it's all about the individual coming up with those steps. Again, it's not that the coach knows what they need to do. That I think that's a misnomer about coaching sometimes. It's really about helping that individual. In the force, they know what they need to do. Let's just use an example of, say, a young officer that's really kind of on a path of growth and promotion and things along those lines. There may be some fear and intrepidation in that they don't really want that path, but they think they should take it. Because if they don't, then what's going to happen here? If they never express that to anyone, which they're certainly not going to express it inside the force, correct? Because
there's a good chance they might not.
That's not a high probability. So they have to explore that for themselves, to allow themselves to truly understand where they are and what they want out of their life. And that exploration may be, you know what? I didn't think I wanted that. But now that we've talked this through through a few sessions, I really do want that. And boy, am I glad I didn't make that choice, because I hadn't gone that deep. Or they may find out that, that isn't what I want to do. And if it's not, then think how much happier they're going to be in their current role, knowing that that's what I want to do. That's what supports me.
Yeah, that's really important, because just because you have those technical skills to do a job doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be good at it, right?
Right.
Or that you might not even want that. And you're right. I do think that there are many cases where people are reluctant to voice that. They kind of keep it inside, because oh man, if I tell my supervisor that I don't want to put in for that sergeant position, and they're expecting me to, then maybe that's I'm going to miss opportunities later, or maybe that means I'm not going to be able to stay in
Yeah.
the role that I'm staying in. And
They may
organize. Yeah,
alienate the person above them. And then they've got someone that isn't supportive of them. There's all these things and dynamics that could happen, but we believe are going to happen, but they may or may not. And I think that that's a big difference.
well, yeah, and later in my career, when you're a chief, right, people come to you and they think that you're always going to have the right answer for them, that you're going to be able to give them the best advice. And it's like, sometimes, again, as a coach, a coach's job is not to give advice. It's really to listen.
Yep.
But when people would, well, hey, what can I do to better prepare myself to get this promotion? Those types of things. One of the first questions that I would always ask is, let's just say it's someone that is putting in to be a sergeant. My question was, why do you want to be a sergeant? And and oftentimes people can't articulate why. Well,
Right.
I've been an officer for X number of years. I've done this, this, and this. It's just time to be a sergeant.
Yeah. It's
And
what's I'm supposed to do.
that's just like the natural progression of things. And
Yep.
and I think it can be really beneficial, because at the end of that, people, once they articulate, okay, wow, these are the reasons. I never really thought about it, but these are the reasons why I think this would be a good fit for me, and this would be a good path for me, and good for the organization. But oftentimes, that you find that people haven't asked themselves the tough questions, right? Like, okay, well, now you're going to be a supervisor. What, do you think you're going to be able to make difficult decisions that involve people that you're friends with? Are
You
you
bet.
aware of these dynamics? What do you think about that? How much time have you contemplated, how a conversation like that might go, or how the interactions might go? Um, and so, yeah, it's like, all right, there's a lot more to consider. And I don't necessarily, I think some organizations have probably figured that out and are decent at it, or you find people that are just kind of, it comes to them pretty naturally. But there's others where I do think that, well, in my experience, I don't know that I've ever seen an environment where that type of where external coaching wouldn't have a significant benefit.
Yeah. Well, and as a chief, your desire is to have every officer perform at their best, whatever that may be. Well, coaching starts at that level, at the individual level, in helping that individual understand, maybe see some blind spots, see some areas of improvement, see some areas of just total strength that they are maybe not capitalizing on, that helps the individual be a better officer, a better leader, a better sergeant, whatever the case might be. Well, if we get the total moving up the ladder in a very holistic way, then the department's going to benefit, because we've got people doing the right things and taking advantage of their strengths. You had mentioned this whole concept of, well, you've got somebody that's got the tactical skills. They've done all the training. They show all the tactical skills. And so it's logical that they're going to go to the next step. Conversely, you have people that are individuals that no one knows that they would be incredible sergeant,
Yes.
but they may not have the skills yet, or they may not have learned all of them, or be as proficient as maybe is necessary. Well, that person might need a little bit of discussion around, what is it that you really want to do that? Well, what are the steps you need to take? Why do you want to do it? And I mean, I could use an experience share from me personally, as I was an individual contributor for quite some time in corporate America, and I wanted to go to the next step. I knew why I wanted to. I knew what I wanted to do. And I went to my boss, and he's like, you've never done this before. What makes you think you're going to be good at it? And there was a hesitancy, shall we say, which basically meant I didn't get the job. But I stuck with it and demonstrated that, no, I knew what I wanted, and yeah, I'm going to be good at this. I took that role and just went from there. But I needed a little bit of help and guidance, and I had a mentor, fortunately, that helped me through that process. It's really what coaches do.
If at first you do not succeed, try and try again.
Absolutely. No doubt about it.
Yeah, but where a coach can help you is that, they can probably point out reasons why it's good for you to keep trying, but they can also maybe enlighten you on reasons why maybe you're on the wrong path, and trying and trying again isn't going to be fruitful. Because you bring up there is tons of examples, and oftentimes when inside of organizations, depending on the size, right, everything's relative. Everything's at scale. If you're in a 100-person department or 1,000 officer department, there's only so many opportunities in any division, anywhere, whether you want to be a canine officer, whether you want to be a training officer, if you want to be a sergeant. So you always have groups of people that are all competing for those same positions. And again, this is another area where I think coaching could be so valuable to agencies, because sure, we can send you to a prep school, we can give you some leadership training, we can do some of these things that might better prepare you for if you are successful. Or, worse yet, in a lot of police organizations, you get promoted, and then we send you to the training a year later, leadership training a year later, and that's, that might be a whole nother discussion.
Yeah.
But sometimes if people fail in that process, or they don't get selected, then the focus becomes external. This isn't about me, it's about somebody else. It's, right. The chief doesn't want me in this role. My lieutenant doesn't like me, so he's not giving me good ratings. There's all kinds of reasons why we start filling in the blank. And again, this is where I think a coach can be so beneficial, because they can help people walk through. And this, one of the things that, I've used this example before in talking, on different episodes, but my morning routine, and how I made a change to my morning routine based on some feedback and recommendations, in a discussion that I had with a coach, and then these were things that I probably wouldn't have done, even though maybe I know about these, I've read about them, I've heard about them, but then having to be forced into a conversation about what it might mean and what how I might benefit from it, I might not have done it. And so I see this oftentimes where we don't do enough self-reflection about, well, maybe the reason why I'm not getting promoted has nothing to do with all these factors that I have created in my mind. Yep. Maybe it's about something that I'm doing. It may, I can want something badly.
Yep.
But if I'm not taking the right steps, then that might never happen.
Yeah. And it's that am I doing all the right things personally? And self-awareness and accountability. I mean, that's what it really comes down to. Coaches help bring out some self-awareness. And that's one of the reasons that, I talk about perspective coaching. What's the perspective you're bringing? Is it a perspective of, well, they're all against me, the lieutenant doesn't want me, this and that? Or is the perspective, I'm going to learn everything I need to know to be the best sergeant possible? And they're going to recognize that when I do it, and then holding myself accountable. But sometimes the self-awareness isn't there. And that's what a coach works on. Is self-awareness is a very big thing for personal growth in any field, anywhere, anytime, is to understand, where am I really? What are the thoughts that I'm thinking about the situation, and what is my perspective? And okay, how do I do? Is that really the space I want to hold for me? And oftentimes we go, no. And so then a coach's role is to say, well, what steps could you take? And help them come up with what the steps are for them personally. And sometimes there are some tools that we have, obviously, that we can offer up. But it's about that person saying, yeah, that's what I'm going to try. Then what does the coach do? Holds them accountable.
Hold them accountable.
Because at the end of the day, you've got to go out and do it. You can think about it all day long, but you got to go out and do it. And the beauty of a coach that comes from outside the department is, my role is to hold that individual accountable. If they decide not to do it, that's their decision, and I'm fine. There's no ramifications for them, because I'm the outside coach. I want you to do this. I think, can we agree that these would be good steps? And the person's like, yeah. Okay, can you get that done in the next month? Yeah, I can do it. We have a couple of meetings during that month and they still haven't done it. Well, this got in the way. Well, what are you going to do to make that happen? Eventually, as a coach, and I've been there numerous times, you realize this person's just not going to do this. Doesn't affect me any. That's their choice. They get to make that choice. But what I try to do is help them elevate that perspective in their world so that they can be and do what they want. That's my role as a coach.
And I think that's critical, again, for anyone that's listening that might be considering bringing external coaching into the organization. I can't emphasize that point enough, because that feedback that comes from external, it's less personal too.
Yeah.
And it's really hard for people that may not have very good self-awareness to recognize that the problem isn't my sergeant. The problem is me.
Yeah. One of the things, Patrick, that we talk about quite a bit is, and this definitely applies directly to what you're saying, is external versus internal, is, someone that's out there listening might go, well, yeah, but he doesn't know anything about law enforcement. That's actually a benefit. The reason being is, and the way and why a coach that doesn't know anything about law enforcement, or, I work with a CEO of a large organization that I know nothing about what they manufacture, but we've worked together for a couple of years every week. And the reason being, his issues, the things, his challenges, the stuff he wants to work on, they're not mine. I don't own them. I see them. I can hear them, because it's not my stuff. And that's really what coaching is a lot about, is why is he going to be any help to me? What does he know that I don't know? And what makes him so smart? It's nothing about that. It's nothing about being smart. It's just not my stuff. And I can hear what you're saying. Now, granted, I've had some training and through practice, to be able to decipher what I'm hearing and put it back. And oftentimes the individual's like, you can see them kind of look down a little bit and go, yeah, I'm doing that. And, they weren't thinking that they were.
So do you think, from a self-awareness perspective, is self-awareness a derivative of a high level of emotional intelligence?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair statement. I I think that they go hand. If you've got a high level of self-awareness, typically it goes hand in hand with a high level of emotional intelligence. Sometimes the converse can be someone's highly emotionally intelligent around their surroundings and with others, but not with themselves. So I think they're definitely tied, but not always the way you'd think. Because again, emotional intelligence is the ability to handle your own emotions in a situation. Well, I've seen, especially senior leaders, that are very good at handling their emotions around their team, and when things happen in a business environment, or in a, it's a critical thing in that particular environment. They're very good at handling that, but they're really not very good at looking at truly what are they feeling, what are they doing internally. And that, again, coaches help bring some of those things out as well.
Yeah, so Daniel Goleman's work in the areas of emotional intelligence,
Yep.
just and the concept of the emotional quotient,
Yep.
your EQ score. Do you think? And I mean, maybe this is a different a strategy that an organization might take, but I do think that there's a role for coaching in that. In when you're trying to raise the EQ of your organization, you know, I mean, are you confident that you can do that? Can you train emotional intelligence into a experienced police officer, or is that something, that almost like a character trait that's developed?
Well,
It's
I
kind of a
think
trap question, but
I think that I don't know that train is the right word. I think you can enhance. I
okay.
think you can improve. And how do you do that is typically awareness. You can have an incredible, let's, use a law enforcement, say it's an incredible sergeant, knows all the things they're supposed to do, lots of experience, all those things, but has very short temper. You know, well, is that emotional intelligence? Well, some people, could argue no, because they're not aware of their own emotions and how that affects others, right?
Right.
But through some work on that,
I've been guilty of that a few times.
I think we all have. And I think that, especially in that leadership role, we can get there. It's like, really, come on. But I think through work and, again, self-awareness of, oh, look, here I go again. But it's that noticing, oh gosh, even if you did lose the temper, or you didn't maybe lose the temper, but you didn't handle it as tactfully as you could have, the recognition of just, oh man, I did that again. Okay, I'm going to do better next time. That's enhancing and improving that EQ, in my opinion. I don't know if Daniel Goleman would agree with that, but that's kind of what I've seen.
No, I think that's it's really fascinating, because it's such an important trait to be an effective police officer. Is you really do have to be able to be a chameleon in many ways.
Yeah.
And when you're on scene, and people are offloading trauma onto you,
Yeah.
whether it's in the moment or it's accumulated. You have to be able to manage that without taking it personally, and that's easier said than done.
Oh, far easier than done, no doubt.
Yeah, and that's and it's sometimes, and again, this is where I think having coaches that come from the outside in, and then also from the inside in, it can be really beneficial, because you can get different perspectives, because if you only talk to people that know what you know, or are similar shared experiences, then then maybe there's the opportunity that you miss an opportunity for growth.
Agreed.
But that, again, that's another one of those things that I can't stress enough, because in the days, right now, some of the I call it a crisis. I think we can't recruit enough new talent to come into the profession. People are leaving the profession, and then there's so much scrutiny on how individual officers are handling their day-to-day activities, and they're being recorded while they're doing it. I mean, what
Yeah.
other profession in the
Yeah.
world has that kind of pressure and that stress? Like, you got to be right every time.
Yeah,
um,
no question. There are no other professions that have that level of. It's very difficult situation to be in, and like you say, the ability to not own all of the things that an officer is subjected to it's got that's got to be a huge job in and of itself.
yeah, when you're the mindset, and people that come into this profession, we do a very good job of screening out. Sometimes I think maybe we screen out too much. I think there are probably people that would be really good at this job, but for whatever reason, they don't make it through a process. Different discussion.
Right.
But generally speaking, we're finding people that are high character, high integrity, that want to help. And one of the things where it's been my experience that you can see uh, the issues that this can create for individuals when now they're put into situations where there really are no good choices and no good outcomes. There's only like pick a choice. It's like pick a path and stick with it.
Yep.
And that feeling that people have when they can't help, when that's their job to feel like, hey, I need to help, but I can't. That can accumulate and express
Absolutely.
itself in a lot of different ways. So again, that's where I think this concept of having a coach, really even just talking through, hey, what's a day look like? How are you managing yourself through your day?
Yep.
Without worrying about, hey, let's not think about outcomes, from individual calls. Let's just think about, what's your approach?
Absolutely. I mean, that's it. Again, it's that ability to have a safe space where someone's holding a space for you to have a conversation. Here's what I'm feeling. Here's what's going on. Here's what this day was like. And and then it's just some questions from there. Well, what does that mean to you? And it's again the difference that I've found, Patrick, is the ability to articulate that to someone is incredibly powerful versus the constant rolling it over in our heads that we all do, right? You can go through something and I mean, just think back of something that you've had in your head for a little while where you get a thought process and you're going down that path and then it comes back around and you go down that path and each time it changes a little bit, or you come up with a brilliant idea and you go that direction and then it's like it takes on a life of its own that may or may not be real. So sometimes just saying it out loud, you hear yourself say it and go, wow, that sounded kind of weird, you know?
That's Pete.
And
I don't know if you're familiar with Pete Blaber. He is a former Army Special Forces officer, and he wrote a book called "The Men, the Mission, and Me." And he's actually written 3 books now. But I had the opportunity to meet him a long time ago when he came to Purdue University on a speaking engagement, and he told this story, and I took that and I've never forgotten it. I've shared it with as many people as I can, but he literally calls it the say it out loud rule.
yep,
It's his example was he's on a mountain in the middle of a battle in Afghanistan, and he's got a high ranking official that's telling him to do something, from 100 miles away, that's not on the ground, that can't see, and it doesn't understand the environment there. And his instinct was to get on the air and tell this person what he thought. But then the refrain for that moment, that, and maybe that's the Viktor Frankl, right? The stimulus gap,
yep.
how, in that moment where we
Pause.
have to that momentary pause where we can choose. uh he said, look, if you ever or find yourself in a situation where you're not sure what you're about to do is the right thing, he's like, say it out loud.
Yep.
And if it sounds like after you say it out loud and you hear yourself say it, um, and it doesn't sound like a good thing to say, yeah, you probably shouldn't say it. So like, no, I
Absolutely.
should probably not get on the air and call, tell my, you know, colonel, my general, my chief, my lieutenant that you are a dumb MFer. And
Yeah, exactly.
uh, and they might be, in that moment you might be right, but it might not be the right thing to say. But
Indeed, that pause is an incredibly effective thing, and then coupling it with the saying it out loud makes a difference.
yeah, say it out loud rule. Try that sometime. It works at home. It works
Oh,
everywhere you go. Works in the
it
car when you're by
absolutely works at
yourself.
home. There's no question about it.
I want to kind of go back to where we started in the beginning. So, we've worked through some examples of what a coaching session might look like, but one of the things that I've come to realize, and it's easier said now that I'm outside of the policing profession, I'm retired, I've had
Sure.
a little chance to decompress and actually, do some reflection on, things that I thought that I did well in my career, things that, you'd like to go back and do over. Um,
Sure.
it's like anything else that you do in life, right? And it's not just in policing, right? There's always like, I have three boys, if I could go back at certain points and as a parent, what would you do different? As a husband, what would you do a little bit different?
Yep.
So, for you, as an executive coach, someone that's worked at the highest level in this profession, um, what might you say to a chief who uh, thinks that maybe they know more than you, and maybe they do, right? But maybe it's their position that you don't know my department as well as I know my department. You don't know policing the way that I know policing. Thanks, but no thanks. Yeah, I'm not interested in this coaching thing.
I think the first thing that I would say is you're absolutely right. I don't know as much. I don't know as much about policing your department. I don't know. Let me rephrase that. I know little to nothing about it. But having said that, and again, the reason that is fundamentally a big reason why having external coaches makes sense, because we're not bringing a mindset that is focused around what the department is, what I want the department to be. We're bringing a open, collaborative thought process for the individuals to allow every person's situation is different. Everyone has different opportunities for growth and different challenges that they may want to address. An outside coach's responsibility is to help them discover that. That's why I don't need to know about your department and exactly how you run your department. I'd love to know more. And I would encourage some conversation around that so that it gives me a perspective. But at the end of the day, in a coaching conversation with an individual, what we're going to be talking about is that individual. And if we can help each individual that we coach, because there's a lot of great coaches at Axon, if we can help them do that, then the whole department begins to lift up by individual. And you still run the department. It's your department. You know how to do it. I don't. But I can help these individuals be the best that they can be. And I assume that's what they want.
Yeah, and that's, and again, that's where sometimes our egos get in the way, right? It's like, and you may view that as a failure if you have to use outside help to do something that maybe you think that your own people should be able to do, yourself included. So,
well, that's an interesting way to put it, Patrick, is that for if I was speaking to the chief, it'd be like, I would so much rather you spend your time on all of the things that your department needs and that you have the vision for where your department's going that are focused around law enforcement. Because your expertise. That's why you're the chief. Focus your time on all of those things because there's a lot of them, I'm sure. And there's only so many hours in the day. And allow someone else to help the individuals become the best that they can be, and to allow them to get a perspective of their world that helps them support you and your vision.
Yeah, and I think that's another area where coaching in and of itself, just even the concept of coaching, why it's so important that we embrace it, because um, we are the helpers and we're terrible about asking for help.
Yes.
We're just not good at it, right? Because we're supposed to be the people with the answers, the tough, men and women that will get things done in crisis. And you know what? Generally, we do, and we do a really good job at it. But there are other areas where we could use help, and and we're good about, I think, running ourselves into the ground and running others into the ground. And then at that point, issues become an EAP issue, or a behavioral issue or a discipline issue, when at the core of it, what you really have is, a human issue that could have been solved through coaching,
How do we avoid getting there in the first place?
some preventative maintenance.
Yeah, and I one final experience share. I've talked to a number of business leaders, high level, from CEOs to senior directors, senior executives, that I've talked to them for a couple of years, and they're like, I mean, not in a coaching environment, but talk to them about coaching, and the response is, without verbalizing it exactly this way, is, you don't know anything about what I do. I don't really need you. And, they don't say that, but I can read through it, and that's what they're saying. It's like, okay, and that's my response is, that's fine. You're right. You ever change your mind? You ever come in across something that you want to be able to have an external person give you a perspective on, let me know. And I've had a couple of experiences where they've come back. One of those I'm still working with 2 years later. Finally said, you know what, let's try this. I don't, I'm sure it came with the attitude it isn't going to do me any good, but let's try it. And we're still working together.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, if I could do it over again, like I said earlier, I would definitely do that, right?
Yeah.
And there's a big difference. And I had this conversation with one of our other guests, right? But there's a difference also between a coach and a mentor. And
Yes.
sometimes people will get those two things confused, and that's, I think, another important distinction. Because I've had some tremendous mentors, and I would have never gotten to where I was. Starting with my own dad, right? He's a little bit of everything, but not everybody. We don't all come from the same place, and there is a huge difference between what a mentor is going to be able to do for you than compared to what a coach can do for you.
No question. I'd leave you with this, Patrick, is, to answer a question that might be out there for some of your listeners is, yes, I have a coach. And I have one regret about my coach and my involvement with my coach. And that is, I didn't do it 10 years before I did. I wish I would have started 10 years earlier with him, because it has helped me all through my career. The last 10 years that I've been working with them, I wish I would have started 10 years earlier, because God knows where I could have been.
Yeah, and that maybe that is a great place to wind this down, because going back to what we started our conversation with, in policing, we've not been good at that, and quite frankly, if we introduce the concept of coaching to an agency at a very early time, is soon, in the early years when officers are in their career, you really can change the culture of an organization and the way people interact with each other, the way that they approach themselves and their own self-development. So that's one of those good pieces of advice, going backwards, if we're going to give advice, is Yeah, listen to what someone might have done differently at an earlier time, but or not.
Yep, exactly. It is what it is.
uh, well, I really do appreciate you spending your valuable time with us. I love that concept, of where perspective coaching, you know getting individuals to really ground themselves in how they approach themselves and how they interact with others, how they interact with themselves, the stories they tell themselves, the stories others tell them about themselves.
Yep,
Coaching, I've gotten a lot out of it, and I think in the end, trying different coaches, working with different people, because you may not find the right fit right away. It's
absolutely.
like going to trying a fitness program. I'm a huge CrossFit guy, but I've done a lot of other programs over the years, and what I would tell people all the time is, number one rule is do find something you're going to stick with and enjoy that you can do. That's step number one. If
Absolutely.
you can, but in the end, it comes back to the other, I think really important thing that you said is that how do you show up, when not just how are you showing up for work, but how are you showing up at home, how are you showing up for yourself?
Absolutely. Because, all these things are intertwined in this thing we call life. And the better that we can approach it as a whole, the more enjoyment and the more that we are able to give to others by approaching it from that more of a holistic standpoint. It isn't, I'm an officer this period of time, and I'm a family person this period of time, and I might do something in my community elsewise this part of the time. It's all one life. It's this whole lots of discussion nowadays about work-life balance. I completely disagree with the concept 100%. There is no work-life balance. There's only life balance, because work is simply a part of life. It's not balancing one against the other. It's balancing everything as a whole.
Yeah, my dad had a really interesting way of driving that point home. He said, if you think you're having a bad day, just try missing one.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah. All right,
Excellent point.
I got, yeah, that's from a Korean War combat veteran.
There
All
you
right,
go.
I get it. I didn't get it when I was young. It took me a while for that little lesson to sink in.
As many of these do, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. Again, see, if I'd had that coach earlier,
There you go.
maybe some of these lessons would have penetrated my thick skull sooner. Well, thank you very much, John. I really appreciate you. Again, if I could cue up the music, if I had a producer in the room, have a little Frank Sinatra queued up. That's life,
There you
and
go.
we could fade out right there. But since I don't, I'm just going to have to say thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to doing this again someday. But until then, have a great day. Not just
You as
you,
well.
but our audience. And I'm out. Log into www.performance-protocol and learn more about how to bring this program to your agency and community.